The beautiful woman had just taken off all her clothes. A strange man suddenly burst into the room. She claimed he was her husband. He pulled out a gun and threatened Nick. Nick was pinned down on the bed. He realized this was a setup for blackmail. Facing the gun, Nick wasn't afraid at all. He dared the husband to shoot him. The woman clearly looked a bit confused. They just wanted to scam him out of money. But they had come across someone who wasn't afraid of death. Nick said he had a brain tumor. He wouldn't live much longer whether he died in bed or not. Seeing Nick so pitiful, the husband lowered his gun and let him go. After getting dressed, Nick immediately said, "Your little act was terrible. You need to learn more, maybe one day you'll pay for your lies." The woman's face was full of frustration. She could only leave alone, but Nick suddenly appeared from behind. He had seen that the woman had some skills. The man seemed to want to show off his own skills. He definitely had to show her. While talking, he took the woman's ring. He spun it around in the snow while holding her hand. Then, he easily removed the woman's watch. Impressive skill. It suddenly made the woman very interested. What Nick was doing and showing off was the nature of a top thief. Wherever he touched, he could take something. The woman was completely surprised. Nick teased her, then he left without looking back. After meeting Nick, a new world opened up for the woman. Today, Nick was gambling. A wallet fell on the table. It turned out and had stolen his wallet. Based on the information inside, she had found him on the street. She was very proud of it, and felt she was better than Nick. But then, Nick's friend arrived. She recognized him immediately, and had fallen into a trap. All her actions were always within Nick's calculations. His friends took her to meet some people. They were all top con artists in the group. They blended into the crowd. Anything of value was easily taken. Just by asking for directions, they took expensive cameras. Then, they would deliberately bump into people on the street, using the opportunity to steal their victims' wallets. They cooperated with each other, and transferred the loot without a trace. Annie used her beauty as a cover, taking a lot of things from men. Nick was very pleased with her performance, considered it a successful test for her, and congratulated her on her success. Nick's warehouse was full of gold, watches and precious jewelry. However, the small tricks of stealing soon made and lose interest. Seeking excitement, she begged Nick to do something bigger. Nick said they were preparing for a big job. 1 week could earn $3 million. After planning, Nick let them rest. She stayed at the hotel with Nick. The next day, Nick took her to a football game. In fact, it was to set up a big plan. Because Annie didn't understand the game, Nick explained how to play it, and he started betting. "I'll bet you $1 that the guy won't catch that sausage down there, okay?" And asked how he knew that. Nick said it was luck. But Anna didn't know it was a plan. He continued to bet with her. A hot beauty left her seat. The two bet on how many men would stare at her. Nick said 3, but instead there were at least 8, as soon as they placed the bets. A rich man next to them suddenly joined in. The rich man counted 5 men who turned their heads, and insisted they let him join the bet. When the beautiful woman started walking, the 3-way bet officially began. They counted them one by one. Finally, they counted 8, and was happy to have won, and she claimed the bet money from the 2 men. The rich man obediently paid, and asked the 2 to bet again. This time, he offered $1,000, betting on which team would commit the first foul. The game began. The rich man quickly failed again. Without any hesitation, he raised the stakes, directly increased the bet to $5,000. This made Nick happy inside. He tried to appear calm and please the rich man. The rich man was delighted to meet Nick, but he didn't know that everything was just beginning. When the match began, the attacking team chose to run. The rich man won $5,000. His excitement also soared to its peak. Nick had lost. After paying, he wanted to stop. But the rich man was very excited. He insisted on dragging him into playing more. He begged Nick to stay and play with him. Nick pondered for a bit. He had to continue. The bet was doubled again. He wanted to win back all the losses. Unexpectedly, just as the match started, he lost again. The rich man was delighted. He felt he had truly met with good luck, and was also worried about Nick's money. She tried to advise him to give up. Nick left. Then he reluctantly returned. He had lost his mind. Bet 50,000 yuan. It was shocking. The rich man agreed again. After starting, Nick lost again, and wanted to persuade him to stop, but at this point, Nick had completely lost his cool. He didn't listen to Anne's advice, directly increased the bet to 100,000. As the stakes got higher, the two also moved to the rich man's room. The rich man's desire to get rich was stimulated, decisively took out 200,000 to play with. Him to the end. The next round is not over, I said he would catch it. Everyone anxiously stared at the TV. Nick lost again. Annie hurriedly grabbed Nick's bag and prepared to leave, but Nick snatched it back. Dumped all the money on the table, invited the rich man to play a $1 million round, and stopped him because it was her money. He wanted to get it all back. The rich man was happy when he was winning, so he agreed, also placed more than $1 million on the gambling table. Then, he waved his hand to get luck, carefully chose a card, surprisingly only got 5 points. Nick was happy because he had a high chance of winning. The rich man looked sad, regretting the lost money. But when he saw Nick's card, he immediately burst out laughing, seeing Nick's card only had 3 points, and collapsed to the ground, and Nick said nothing more. He seemed unable to withstand a major blow. He ignored and walked out without a word. The rich man provoked Nick. You should be sad if you have the ability, boy. Nick was provoked, returned once again. He doubled the bet, then made an even more crazy bet. Nick asked the rich man to choose a player, and he would be responsible for guessing the number that the rich man chose. Hearing such an unbelievable idea, the rich man thought Nick was crazy. His chances of guessing correctly were very small. It was no different than sending money to himself. The rich man felt this was not exciting. I don't want to take advantage of him. But Nick passed the task of guessing the number, directly gave it to Annie, seeing him so crazy. The rich man immediately agreed. Annie, because the bet was too big, she didn't dare to risk such a big gamble, but just as she decided to leave, the rich man chose a number. Then it was her turn, waiting for Annie to choose the person. She was so nervous she didn't dare to breathe. She had to hold the telescope and glance aimlessly at the field. When she was desperate, she suddenly saw a very familiar figure. This fat guy was Nick's accomplice. She immediately understood everything. Number 55, it was unbelievable. The rich man was shocked, and couldn't believe what he was seeing, shouting and yelling. Anna was not yet aware of what had happened. The rich man yelled he couldn't believe it, completely immersed in excitement. He was ready to bet, happily offered all the bet money. The fat guy, number 55, had been set up by Nick on the field. The key to this bet was to hide all the plans from Annie. Only then could he not reveal any trace of it. How did you do it? It turned out Nick had investigated the rich man's background. The lights in the hotel room were hanging with the number 55, even on the posters in the elevator. The number 55 was printed, even on the uniforms of the security guards. They all wore number 55 tags. On the street, there were signs with the number 55. Little Fatty also accidentally and quietly passed in front of the rich man. By the end of the day, the rich man was full of clues. So when he saw Little Fatty on the stadium, he unconsciously chose the number that Nick wanted. Nick's amazing plan shocked Anne very much, but before she could praise him, Nick told the driver to stop the car, then took out $80,000, and parted ways with Annie. He told the driver to take Anne to the airport. Then sat in the car behind, until the car was very far away, and still couldn't accept the harsh reality. But at this time, in Nick's heart, a bigger scam was being formed. Nick found the president of a car team, promised to help the opposing team win the championship. To develop data software, the second generation rich had spent hundreds of millions of dollars. But the opponents were also desperately researching and developing. The amount of money spent by both sides would increase. Day by day, Nick proposed to pretend to be a defecting engineer, sell pirated software to the opponents. This made the opponents spend a lot of money but couldn't get accurate data. The second generation rich thought this was a good idea, and cooperated with Nick to act. However, the housekeeper behind was very cunning. He immediately suspected Nick. At dinner, everything was initially progressing as planned. However, the girlfriend that the rich young master brought was the woman Nick loved. When Annie was flirting with him, the more Nick looked, the angrier he got. He rushed forward and punched the rich young master. It was said to be just acting, but this punch seemed personal, and didn't know about their agreement. She was immediately scared to death. Nick was restrained by his 2 bodyguards, and ruthlessly thrown out the door. But in less than a minute, people from the car team came looking for him. Nick sold the software, easily withdrawing $3 million. For the owner of the car team, it was no different than giving it away for free. Nick didn't stop at all, changed the owner and sold the software to all the other car teams. His software sold very quickly, earned more than $40 million in a minute, but as soon as he returned to the hotel, he received a message from Anne. It turned out that what Nick had sold was the genuine version developed by the rich young master for hundreds of millions of dollars, but Nick wasn't panicked. Instead, he calmly waited for Anne to come find him, after confirming the other party was safe. He carried 2 bags of money and left together. A driver bit his braces, wearing a neck protector. After tightening his helmet, he floored the gas. The driver got out of the car without being hurt, but Nick in the front was hit and injured. The driver pulled out a gun and directly arrested the 2 people. The rich young master was furious. He wanted to strangle Nick on the spot. The software that he had spent hundreds of millions of dollars researching, in an instant had become a bargain on the street. He just couldn't figure out how. His $1 million security system, how could it be so easily broken by Nick? He squeezed Anne's nose, forcing Nick to reveal the key, but Nick said it had nothing to do with Annie. He himself had paid a high price to hire top hackers. These lies immediately made the rich young master lose patience. He wanted to continue torturing Nick, but the housekeeper shot Nick through the heart. Seeing the dead man, the rich young master hurriedly left the scene. When Anne was grieving, she was suddenly pushed aside by the housekeeper. He had stepped in to save Nick. It was all just a plan. It turned out the housekeeper was the mole. Telling Nick the rich young master's password. For this huge amount of money, he had been secretly operating for 7 years. The bullet just now, the housekeeper deliberately deviated from the heart and aorta. As long as he stopped the bleeding in time, Nick would be fine. He inserted a syringe into the bullet hole and immediately brought Nick back to life. It turned out this old man was Nick's adoptive father. He raised Nick and taught him all about making a living through scams.